So disruptive innovation is really about fundamentally changing the way things are done, reevaluating the existing supply chain, the processes, and the way we extract resources, and looking at doing things fundamentally different with a whole new set of collaborators and industry participants that makes it look entirely different than what it is today.
So it changes the system across every aspect of mining. So you bring one innovation in, and there's impact through every single system in that mining chain.
I tend to look at disruptive innovation as something that is not obvious at first. It's incremental, but once it gains speed and it gains, it's sustainable and it gains a foothold, then the speed of that change becomes startling from retrospect.
The easiest analogy would be if you had to go back, let's say 15, 20 years ago. If you were to go into a bank, you would be basically getting monthly paper statements of, what your bank balance is, what your transactions look like, etc. You weren't able to access that information online. Well, the analogy for mining today is that mining is pretty much what banking was 25 years ago, right? Huge amounts of manual processes, production information that's feeding up right from the bottom of the mine site. A lot of that is still being done through spreadsheets, is being done through paper and things like that. And so what you don't have today is complete transparency of information, real-time information flowing directly from the face of the mine all the way through to sort of corporate head office.
It's sort of like the computer when it first got introduced. The banks used it, the research institutions used it. It wasn't until it started gaining a foothold in the larger civic audience that people suddenly realized the potential for doing all sorts of things. That's what I say disruptive technology. It starts off being small, novel, and then from novel it becomes popular, and then popularity suddenly reaches a different height of innovation.
Innovation, however you want to call it, is about changing the world. And the way you can disrupt that is by bringing other things in really quickly and using them relatively immediately. So I wouldn't call it disruptive innovation, I would call it disrupting the industry. Innovation is how we change the world.
The challenge that our industry is facing right now in mining, both exploration all the way through to production, is that we're not very efficient at doing what we do. We certainly haven't revolutionized like industries like manufacturing have done, the automotive industry. They've been through a revolution in how they do their job, and our industry needs to do that. We need to change the way we work. We need to change the process of doing what we do.
And so we talk about things like, well, you have to innovate, digitization, but what does that actually mean?
Mining companies want to lower costs. Automation is a key part of that. So some of the peripheral events we have at this convention that tie into that theme include the electric car race, for instance. So those are things that are trying to show real-life applications looking forward.
Essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to fundamentally transform mining to a zero-waste industry. If you look at some of the cost drivers, environmental drivers of industry, it's related to energy, water consumption, and environmental footprint. So we've created an innovation strategy for the entire industry, and that's a good place to start, have the industry talking to each other, develop that strategy and develop those targets, and then actually drive it into a transformation of the business of the industry, all across the entire board.
As we now have learned to store electrical energy a lot faster and charge batteries a lot faster, we can move away from carbon-based fuel, diesel in this particular case. And of course, when you're burning diesel, you're creating diesel particulate matter, which does present some respiratory health risks. And reducing that or eliminating that from the work environment can only be a benefit.
We were very interested in understanding the structure of the ore bodies around Flin Flon. We want to understand not just Flin Flon ore bodies, we want to understand that type of ore deposit. So we took a multi-pronged approach. We had our scientists who developed the understanding of how the processes of ore formation took place, which in turn informed the technological solution of looking at seismic waves propagating through that region to help us understand the structure of the ore deposit, which in turn led to the development of a passive seismic study where we were developing, instead of having explosions take place to drive our seismic waves and create our seismic image, we use the ambient noise in the environment, the mining trucks running around, generating noise and integrating that noise over weeks instead of an instantaneous explosion. So the impact of an innovation such as the passive seismic method is very much around a cheaper way of getting at the same data, but it's also a societal benefit in terms of not needing to set off explosives. The ability to discover ore deposits at depth. You couldn't image them before, but now you have a technology that lets you extend existing ore deposits, for example, into the subsurface, extend the life of mines, and do that in a much cheaper and cleaner way.
Several companies are touting and showing the advances they've made in virtual reality, whether it's virtual reality to go and look at core shacks, virtual reality in underground environments.
So the impact on this technology in this industry is cost savings of training before you put somebody into a mine, making sure that they can handle the industrial equipment and the situations that may take place underground. Being able to train your employees in a safe work environment is not only cost effective, but safety as well, to make sure that they're able to handle whatever situations may arise.
We can now mine remotely if we have to and take away the worker from the rock face, which again is improving health and safety. And this is all done using technology that involves real-time analysis, real-time say vibration analysis. We can pick up equipment failures easier, or if there's going to be some rock failures, they can be picked up a lot easier.
So one of the things we've just done is we've released a new version of our Reflex Hub IQ product that for the first time allows the geologist in near real time to make decisions about whether things are working, where the drill hole's going. A drill program, say, operating in Europe, the geologist might be sitting in an office in Vancouver making a decision about whether or not things are working correctly. So that is a sort of start in disrupting the system about the way we do things. We're going to stop writing things down on bits of paper. We're going to do this stuff in near real time, and we're going to do it in a distributed way across the globe.
Digital transformation is going to be very disruptive to the industry. The same way we've seen a lot of technologies disrupt other industries, digital innovation to mining is going to require companies to think very differently about the way they do things and find digital solutions to help them do it so that they can continue to compete and stay viable.
In order to enable this digital environment, what they have to do is put in huge amounts of bandwidth. They need to be able to access information from the cloud. They're going to be having remote digital solutions and sort of operations. And so that bandwidth is incredibly valuable. And in turn, that enables things like free education, right? If you were to take advantage of things like the Khan Academy's sort of free education model, or you were to think about being able to connect communities to the broader World Wide Web and creating small and new businesses. I think these are all new opportunities which arise out of digital. That's just not prevalent in mining today, right? And so mining is sort of really where banking and consumer products was probably 2 decades ago, right? And so that's the opportunity, but also the challenge for mining going forward.
In terms of disruptive innovation in the space of public engagement, public communication, I think it's really an issue of more transparency, more accessibility, that the industry really reach out to the public. As more and more people move from rural areas into the urban areas, they're increasingly disconnected from the resource base on which most of us rely. And that's not just mining, it's also forestry, agriculture. They all have that growing disconnect. So it becomes increasingly important that all of the resource-based industries do a better job of connecting and communicating with the public.
You know, when it comes to actually raising capital and having confidence of investors, it's transparency. We've got a regulatory framework here that forces resource companies that are looking for shareholders' capital to supply enough information that they can let those shareholders get access and help them determine the risks associated with that possible investment. And so again, I think it's transparency. The other thing I would say that Canada does thrive at is keeping relatively firm goalposts in place. You know, we're not perfect at it by any means, but knowing that if I invest into a mine in Quebec, that the requirements and perhaps even the royalties that I pay in that are not going to change over the time that it takes to build that mine, and more importantly, when it's time to get the cash flow back when that mine is operating itself. We want to have consistency. We want to just have a good, stable environment, and that stability is so important when it comes to this.
I mean, we have great companies who employ First Nations to kind of do that. And by the way, mining in Canada, as you know, is the #1 employer of First Nations.
Well, I think if they haven't yet included Indigenous peoples as part of how they grow their business and how they disrupt mining, how they become more innovative, how they become more collaborative, it is a way to do business. And that means taking it on, wholeheartedly in a way that encompasses those people that may never have been included before in mining.
In terms of whose role it is to do that kind of communication, I think government has a role, industry has a role, but it really helps also to have a third-party organization. For instance, ResourceWorks, which is a group that is seen to be not aligned with industry or academia or government, but can just provide that information, kind of no strings attached. It's just factual information, and with a sense of what the public really wants that information to include. An organization like ResourceWorks can really facilitate that understanding.
That's exactly the manifestation of Canadians working in mining. So Canadians work in 109 countries in mining. And so those practices, clean technology, innovation, health and safety, corporate social responsibility, connection with communities, Canada's #1 in so many dimensions in the mining industry. Most mining companies resident, most of them are in Toronto or Vancouver. Most companies listed, most money raised for mining exploration, development, and production is in Canada, most of it in Toronto. Canada's #1, and #1 by far in a lot of equity, a lot of stock exchange, governance, and so on. Those are good applications for a lot of emerging economies that are trying to benefit and retool themselves.
When you look at half of the world's mining projects in terms of exploration and capital raised, it comes from Canada. And therefore we have a responsibility to do it right, and a responsibility to sort of move the whole industry into being cleaner and more efficient and indeed more innovative.
I think that in India, they might be interested in knowing how we do it in Canada. There's a bit more trust, a bit more participative environment that they can foster with not just academic community, of which they have a very rich tradition, but also with the business community. We do that now as a matter of second hand. It's natural to us. But it's something that probably the Indians would probably appreciate doing more of, because so many decisions have been centralized in the past that having this horizontal dialogue might be a welcome participation.
Countries like India, when they go looking for disruptive innovations, and similar to many countries around the world, what they're looking for is the leadership that Canada provides in terms of its geoscience and how it approaches its geoscience.
We've become very good at here in Canada is working collaboratively across jurisdictions, between and among agencies with an interest in mining, all focused on helping each other to become better at what we do for the betterment of our industry, the sustainability of our industry, and of course the betterment of our country.
It's a really good time right now to share in the vision that our global industry is developing around disruptive innovation and the way it needs to change. And so there's as much work to be done in the developed world around changing our industry as there is in the developing world. In some respects, we're all at a level playing field right now. And so actually, if we can all buy into a global shared vision, then everyone can move forward as a global industry and change.
I wouldn't understand why mining in India wouldn't take the same path that they did for other industries and financial services, and make India one of the most innovative mining countries in the world.
So by going down that pathway, you can actually import that into India. You can actually jump in and import those sort of things in India and look at the approaches we're taking, the business models we're taking, and use all of that to transform the industry. But what India can do is they can be transformative from the get-go. They're not trying to change things. They're trying to see where we've come and where we're going and start from there, instead of ending there.